Yeah, ADWCTA is going to count down, and
Okay.
then you are going to. He's not going to count to zero, but you push the button. It's like playing DDR, right? There you go.
Okay.
Now his counting is questionable.
It's fine. It's good. It's perfectly good. I'm gonna count down now. Okay. You ready? Okay, you're
Oh
ready.
my god!
Three, two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge podcast. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and we have another very special guest, a returnee to the Lightforge podcast. Really needs no introduction,
Mm.
which makes it a lot easier for me. But welcome back, Shadybunny. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while. It's good to be back.
Shady, I was talking to you before we started recording, and I believe this is the first Lightforge you've been on for BGs, right?
Yeah, it is.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so Shady, who has been with us since the early days, since the Poltralizer, since just going through arena meta after
Uh,
arena meta with us, is now back to talk about BGs. And BGs was something that I know you picked up a little bit later than a lot of the other streamers, right?
Yeah, I pretty much started playing seriously during the spell meta, but I did like semi-seriously before. Like I played during the drunk pot meta, and I came back I think when dragons were introduced, but I never really pushed, and this is the first time I'm pushing where I'm really playing a lot.
Yeah, this is the first time that you're really pushing, and in typical Shady fashion, he's just crushing it right now. He's playing both on NA and EU, and I think you are within like the top 100 on EU and top 50 on NA. And you've just been spamming both, doing the thing that you always do, which is methodical gameplay. If you guys don't watch Shady's channel, you can go there. And I think right now he's probably the best person to learn from because he's always talking out his plays. I don't know if it's necessarily for chat, but you just kind of like to talk it out for yourself as well, and then chat gets to benefit. And I've been watching a lot of your streams, so I have gotten to benefit from it. And part of the reason I want to get you on, well, part of the reason is because we always enjoy having you on, but another
mm-hmm.
part of the reason is because I think you have one of the most unique play styles when it comes to BGs right now. I watch a lot of streamers. I mean, just to name some off the top of my head, I watch Victor or Sun Bacon Relaxer. I can't. I still can't.
He's
It's
still
been
Victor. He didn't
so
change his
long.
actual name. He changed 12 wins. The man is still named Victor.
No, but Sun Bacon Relaxer. Come on. Okay, so
Alright.
I watch Victor. I watch Dog, Slissa, Sun Glitters. I watch like quite a few, and then every once in a while I'll also watch people like Wobble. And your playstyle, Shady, you can categorize it after I categorize it and tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think you have a very polarized playstyle, as in more polarized than these other high leaderboard streamers that I see, in which you more often than not put yourself in one of two camps. Either you kind of sit down, be realistic, and you're saying, okay, like it's about gold efficiency, it's about knowing my place. I didn't start with a good hero. Here are my options, here are my outs. It's just about gold efficiency. I'm going to take that, like -5, +13, and just really grind it out. And if the opportunity presents itself, whether through a good hero or through good luck, maybe both, that's when you go for it. And that's a high percentage risk that you take. And then you get that +90 MMR. And from watching you a lot in these weeks, that's sort of how you've made this huge climb. You've really climbed up the leaderboards by doing that. And I think you do this a lot more than other streamers that I see. Do you think my categorization is correct, or would you like to add something to that?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I pretty much just bide my time. I just wait. There's a top hero. Let's go. Or like, oh, this is the nuts. Oh, we get a really early triple, right? So it's very patient. And then I think in terms of just bad heroes, Like for instance, like Mukla, like oh anyone's like, oh man, like oh this is like no hero. I'm like Mukla's perfectly fine, or it's like the way how I play him because like he curves straight into taunt like crazy, like very well. So I think I do really well with bad heroes compared to other streamers where they just get like, well, I guess I just need to go all in and just hit. And it's like, no, I mean you can like top 3, top 2 with that, unless you get really bad RNG.
And I think your attitude is very well suited for this meta because part of the reason that I'm not playing these days, and I think something that frustrates quite a few people. For example, I've heard Dreads complain about this literally every 5 minutes when he plays BGs, but that's just what the man does. Um, he's very frustrated, and I'm kind of frustrated as well by the disparity in not just like the quote bad heroes, but kind of like the not fun heroes as the public would um, kind of categorize. And I think what you do is you just accept it. You're very zen about it, and from the very beginning, you're just like, okay, if I have a Syndragosa, if I have a Mukla, like just by the percentages, I have to play differently and I have to plan differently. Everything is different from the very beginning, and that's fine, right? And it's like I can dream, but like I have to understand that only 5% of my like Syndragosa games or whatever the percentage is are going to get me into that like first place or even like be competitive within the top two. And I'm just gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna go into the try to get into the top four. Maybe I can survive to be in the top three, and then that's fine because hey, I have Syndragosa here. And as for me, I literally never see anyone else play Syndragosa, and I've seen you play it. I don't know, like 4 or 5 times in just the streams that I've watched recently, which is 4 to 5 times more than I've seen with literally every other streamer that I watch.
Yeah, Cindy is interesting to me because she is amazing at protecting your life total early. Where I mean, without going too in depth, you have like two lines where you either go to 3 on 5 gold or you don't. If you go to 3 on 5 gold, you take a little bit more damage, but you usually start with a token or a swabby, and then you have the advantage that you might be able to freeze a shield on 3, and then it gets really good. Or you just freeze, buy 2 strong things on 5 gold, then keep freezing, buy two more strong things on 6 gold, and then you're I guess the reason why I like it is you don't have to just buy the first thing you see on tier 4 just to stabilize because you already have big things. And I could just browse. I could be like, no, 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 that's an arm. No, 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 that's a harbinger. And I could just like grab the taunt pieces straight away. Whereas if you're playing a different hero, you might not be able to browse as much because you're going to be taking a lot of damage. But now I have like, I don't know, like a 9 health homunculus on the board or something stupid because I maybe froze an overseer along with it, and just that will carry you for a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot from from your streams about taunt. I would say all of my knowledge of taunt comp has been from watching you and lurking in your streams. And I think you've had some cool innovations that, once again, I don't really see many other people doing. For example, taunt comp as in Karaji cheese with Imp Mama. That, oh, the first time I saw you kind of not just doing it, it was like after you had already discovered it and figured out the nuances, and I saw you aiming for it and doing this. I was like, what the heck is this stupid, cheesy comp? And of course, like after I saw it in action, it made total sense. Okay, first of all, Shady, can you explain what this is, kind of the origins of how you figured it out, and why chat should consider playing it?
Yeah, so Harbinger is just so much immediate power. Uh, your board is not going to change almost like 4 or 5 turns in a row a lot of the time because you're just rolling for very specific units. But the basic premise is you have a soaker on the far left. A soaker is a divine shield or just any minion that is not going to die. It's going to stay there, right? So pretty much a divine shield. And then you're going to play a lot of the time Taunt Reborn or Death Rattle Taunt. So pretty much Void Lord or Acolyte of Cthulhu. And then you're going to have Harbinger in the back and maybe another good buff target in between some more taunts, like a Battle Master or an Imama or, another Divine Shield. And what happens is every time a taunt dies, if you have 2 Harbingers on the board, it's going to give +8/+8 total, 4 to one side, 4 to another side. So that ramps up crazy fast, especially if your Soaker is a Deflecto. because then your Deflecto is then going to regain its Divine Shield from one of your other taunts that has a reset on it, such as like a Micro Mummy with a Divine Shield on it. And yeah, you just keep beating people for a very long time. They need crazy amount of stats or cleave. It's very weak to cleave, like disclaimer. If you get cleaved, oof, it's just bam, because you lose so many buffs because things die at the same time and then it doesn't properly add. But yeah, if you do well with that and you can triple, let's say, your Harbinger into a 6-drop and you get Imp Mama, it just keeps itself, the Mama just keeps herself alive, because she, you put her in between, say, 2 Acolytes so that she gets maximum start health, right? And then you hope that she doesn't run into either a huge minion or a poison. She survives that hit, she spawns a taunt, sometimes a Void Lord, then that taunt dies, then heals the Mama, you buff again, plus whatever's on the other side, because the taunts will still buff 2 sides. And you can just, you can have these crazy fights where your Imp Mama takes 3 to 4 hits and just keeps spawning taunt. Like if it hits into a 1-1, the opponent's just like, oh my god, I'm just dead, right? You just see all the taunts come out.
Take it from me, guys. I've seen Shady pull this off quite a few times, and once again, this is something that I don't see anyone else doing. Period. And I think part of it comes from Shady's increased willingness to set it up, go for arm Karaji plays. I've been calling Shady like the king of taunt comp, and we'll go more in depth on general taunt comp stuff later on. But I think the Imp Mama kind of innovation is very interesting because it has shades of that gold, that like parrot beast comp where it looks very small going into battle. Like you have this 6'10" Imp Mama, and I've seen battles where by the end it's like a 40 attack plus Imp Mama, and it's buffing everything as well. It's not just the Imp Mama getting buffed; it's like everything on the board just like growing and growing, and then spawning more taunts, and just really annoying. And if at the beginning of the battle you looked at it, I think a lot of people would judge and say, "There's no way that comp is winning," but it just always does.
Yeah, it's funny, like when people see it for the first time, there's like, I can't believe that you're like top 3 with this crap, right? Like what do you do? Like, or that's another thing, like whenever you see the Acolyte triple, I just like roll past it immediately because it's just very inefficient to buy it unless you have like an extra Acolyte banked up and you're specifically shooting for Mama. It's like, why aren't you tripling? It's like, I just want to keep 2 tier 1 minions on my board because they're good at buffing.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about taunt comp. I want this episode, and for a good portion of it, for all the our listeners, our eager listeners who I'm sure love taunt comp, everyone's favorite composition, BGs, to come out of this and be like, wow, I completely understand the nuances of taunt comp. And I think all right, don't tune away, guys, okay? Because some of you guys are going resident sleeper here, people leaving, they don't want any of this. But Shady has been just rocketing up the leaderboards, and this is a huge reason why. And I think part of it comes from this public perception, which is wrong. And Shady, sometimes I see it in your chat as well, where people are just like, okay, well, yeah, like obviously I know that taunt comp is useful, but you try to transition out of that as fast as you can into an quote actual winning comp. How many times have you seen that? Come on, how many times?
Yeah, it's a lot of it, like back when in the spell meta when Juggler was kind of like, right now Juggler's a lot weaker due to like the insane stats piggies make. But people are like, all right, when are we transitioning? I was like, we're not, because if you transition out of this, you transition into the next game. Like you do not have, unless you somehow have like brand golden mirrors on the million Callies or something, you're not getting just out of taunt comp. That's not happening.
Yeah. So let's talk about the setup or the ramp into taunt comp, because I think that is one of those things where people mess up. And if you look at HS replay stats, taunt comp has like the lowest win rates, and this is why a lot of people when I was actually playing BGs, they would say it's like, Merps, I don't understand. It's like you keep saying taunt comp is good and is very useful, but the win rates say it's trash. And I'm just like, well, of course. It's like, it's one of those that people fall into too late, right? So the stats are capturing all these people who are desperately trying to live. And then at the very last turn, they pick up the arm and a harbinger, and they're like, come on, baby, one more turn. And then, of course, they die. And then HS Replay says, oh, you were Taunt Comp, and Taunt Comp now sucks. So there's a lot of people who have that experience and they take away from it, well, Taunt Comp sucks. And a lot of it is because they didn't have the mindset to really set themselves up for success. So how do you do it? Like, at what point do you start thinking of taunt comp? And can you give us like a few examples of ways that you start to kind of prep for this?
So it starts at champion selection, honestly, right? Like I look at which types are in. Shields are incredibly important. So mechs is the most important type for being. I think just in general, you look at your heroes, and if you do not have a top tier hero, you already want to lean taunt comp a little bit because it's such a good tier 4 strategy. And whenever I'm not playing a very strong hero, I don't really like leveling past tier 4 unless I have the nuts, right? You get the very early triple, you somehow protected your health, and you say, all right, let's go for 6, let's get flat tusk. But that is most of the time when you're playing a strong hero. When you're playing a weaker hero, let's say a tier 3 or bottom tier 2 hero, it is oftentimes very difficult to get that 6 drop and then have the health to actually use it. So it starts at the hero selection. You evaluate the strength of your hero, and then you look at the types that are in. Like I mentioned, shields are very, very good for taunt comp. There's different variations, of course, but when we talk about taunt comp for now, we'll call it just arm, right? Like that's the arm comp. The other one's the harbinger comp. So for arm taunt comp, you taunt up divine shields, and then they get a lot of attack, and then you have various other things you can do to increase the strength of that comp. So it really starts there where you want to see, okay, how many shields do I have in? Usually if mechs are in, that alone is enough, but of course more shield, more better in that case. The elemental is the weakest one, just because that one you really need to put it in the back. You never want that to ever attack because it kills itself off with the Wind Fury, and then the arms can't buff it. And then of course like Bolvar is always in, right? So yeah, it starts at hero selection. Then early game, you see if you have pairs to see, okay, can I high roll? If you don't have pairs, I pretty much just go into tier 4 and I just start looking. And then I'm pretty much just looking for either a Harbinger setup, which is the Taunt Reborn we talked about, or an arm setup, which is, can I find an arm? Can I find an Argus? Can I find Divine Shield? You could play just something like a Deflecto and then a module on a reset, and you can play that for several turns, and then you hit an arm, you're like, ding, all right, and then it just, you could start with one taunt, and then you have a Deflecto on your board, suddenly you find an Argus, you can taunt that Deflecto now because you have an arm, there is value in it, and that's probably the most powerful version of taunt comp as well, is when you have taunted Deflectos, because your shields can then get reset by your other taunts dying.
I think that's really interesting that, like, and for some people, they don't play like that because they're not thinking of it, and for other people, they don't play like that because they just don't want to. Like, they don't want to admit. As soon as the character selection screen comes up, they're like, all right, time to just play for like 4th place, which I know is ADWCTA is sitting there,
and who every single hero can get 4th place. Isn't that the point of the game?
ADWCTA gets Hook Tusk, and he's like 4th, baby.
Let's go that's really going for it.
ADWCTA somehow gets Maev to come back. He's like, best 4th place hero. Let's go.
But this is my question. So how do you get to like what percent of your non-tier 1, tier 2 heroes end up in shield comp when you're playing like to maximize your MMR gain?
So if we're going off HS Replay, that would be just honestly, it's so dependent on the minion types, because if I have all the regions, like all the pieces for taunt comp, I will pretty much always play it, unless of course Bob tells me like you can't. There's okay, so when we talk about taunt comp, like I can't obviously always play taunt comp, but I'm very accustomed to tier 4 strategies, right? You can play Ground Shaker on tier
Hmm.
4, you can play Harbinger on tier 4, you can play pure mech on tier 4, you can play Arm on tier 4 with or without Deflectos, you can play kind of like Poison Scam Me, right? You can squeeze that in there. If Murlocs are in, you're a Lich King, not right now because he's out, but you get an early Selfless, you reborn that, you reborn some poisoned Murlocs or a bit of a hybrid where you have some taunts that are high attack with the arm and then 1 or 2 poisons that you revive. So it's not always just taunt comp, but it's more a mindset of, am I going to level to 5 or not? Because for me, I usually like to level to 5 if I can triple into a 6 early. If I can't triple early, a lot of the time I'm not going to 5 because it's just a waste of gold. I'm going to skip a turn. And the people that hit their flat tusk 3 turns ago, it doesn't matter if I have my flat tusk now, unless I have a shaker, right? Then it's fine. I can buff, I can do something, but I'm not going to catch up. That's the basic mindset is, even if I can triple into a 6 3 turns after they have, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth the gold. It's not worth the resource. I'm not going to switch my comp because I'm not going to be as big as they. I can't beat them at their own game. I need to beat them with my game, which is just pure cheese.
Pure cheese. I love it. But it is very much so your play style, very much the way you think and approach the game, whether it was in Arena, KW, or it is now in BGs, in which it's like, all right, very methodical, very much so breaking down what does this mean? How does this help us? How could it, how does this potentially set us up for the future? And I think something that people don't understand when they watch your stream, and once again, I see it in the chat sometimes, is you stay on tier 4, and sometimes this will happen where you're rolling on tier 4, you're explaining sort of what you're looking for as well, but you go -10, right? Like on tier 4, and people are just like, dude, why didn't you just level to 5? And this isn't even when tier 5 costs like 8 or 7 gold. This is when tier 5 costs like 4 gold, right? And they're still like, dude, Shady, man. It's like, come on. I know you're top 50, but like that was a boneheaded play. Why didn't you go to 5? And this is one of those things where I think a lot of people just see it's like higher tier equals more good. Higher tier minions equals more good.
You can
More
buff all
good.
your taunts by +2/+2.
Man, oh yeah, of course. People make the strong shell argument a lot, which I know you've heard as well. Um, but yeah, I think this is also just one of those things where people have to recognize if you're behind, BGs is a game in which it's so hard for you to come back, right? If people have gotten the whatever super scaling that is currently meta, right? If they have the super scaling, it's pretty hard for you to catch up. Especially if you are a hero with a hero power that is not conducive to catching up. Something like a Syndragosa, right? In which it's like your hero power is done. Your hero power was done turns before you even considered that. It helped you get to tier 4, and you had the tempo, and you had this little life, life bonus because of that, and that was it. Like you're pretty much done there. And for a lot of people, I think they're just like, no, I am different. I'm special. I will get the triples. I will get I'm gonna have that epic comeback, right? It's like I don't care if this guy got flat tusk 3 turns ago, like you said. I'm gonna get it this turn, and magically through like breaking, physics and thermodynamics and numbers, I will outscale the person that got it like 2-3 turns ago, which I think is just something that people have to accept won't happen. And you accept it the absolute fastest out of everyone I've ever seen. You're just like, nope, okay, this is it. Nope, cutting it out. Tier 4. Which leads me to this question. Do we have a tier 5 problem right now?
So tier 5 to me is just on the way to tier 6. Like
Yeah.
if I am playing a high roll game, I will go to 5 and I will try to get to 6 as fast as I can. Unless, of course, something happened. Like let's say I pulled my 6 and I whiffed and I'm defensive. Obviously, I can't go to 6 and do something there. But it feels like tier 5 is where you Like when quill boards are out, it's different, right? When quill boards are in, something like a Bran or a Lightfang isn't that great anymore. It's not
Yeah.
something where, like back in the day, you pull an early Bran, you're like, ooh, this is going to go a long way. This is great. Right now, I feel like Bran is a whiff. Like if you have to take an early five with Quillboards in, Bran is a whiff. You'd much rather have instant tempo from either Lightfang, Mithrax, or even, say, Divine Shield's Piggy, right? The 4/8. To me, I'd snap that over a Bran in almost any game. And it's really when pigs are in, you have just such a crazy amount of scaling with Flapless Gagam that unless you're a Reno and you're pulling and you're instant zapping the Lightfang to make it golden, they don't really care. You have your Lightfang for a while, and then people get bigger than you. So to me, it feels like, yeah, you go to tier 5 on the way to tier 6. It's not like back in the day where, at least, to my understanding, you wouldn't really push 6 as often. But yeah, you have like Eliza on 6, super strong. When you're on 6, you can just like buy double Caligos and start scaling and all this crazy stuff. So yeah, I really dislike being on tier 5 for sure.
It's interesting, and the reason I ask is because so Shady, you play a ton of BGs nowadays. I don't. And when I was playing a ton of BGs, especially like earlier on, like season 2, for example, when I played a lot, you didn't play a lot, and it's just very jarring for someone like me because this is the first time, with the exception of like the initial meta, which was mechs, all tier 4 mechs, right? Like this is when everything first came out, like alpha BGs. This is the first time that tier 5 has been this empty, or kind of this inefficient, where you look at it and yeah, if pigs are in, Bran and Lightfang are not good enough. On tier 5, what are you hoping for? It's all kind of piggy related, right? It's blood gem related. You're hoping to get like the Agam, but that's kind of to pair with these kind of pig related like gem generating things. So yeah, like to me it feels wrong in a way because that's the way that I've always played, and just maybe this is kind of nostalgia for me, but I'm just like it felt natural to kind of end at tier 5 at quote end for like a decent amount of players to end up there, and then for the really ambitious slash lucky ones to end up at 6. And it just kind of made sense, right? And then a lot of people, or basically everyone, had the chance to triple into 6s, and it was just like this good kind of stopping ground there. And right now, I think you're absolutely correct in the way that you play, in which like a lot of people who are struggling, right? Like they're like, oh man, Shady, I'm hard stuck. And I think a lot of them are mistakenly wasting gold, not being gold efficient, going to 5, not really knowing what they want to find. And it's because there's not much for them to find on tier 5. And if your answer is like, man, I gotta get like the Agam, and also I need to triple into this like Flat Tusk before I even have the triple, right? Like then you're all sorts of lost, and you're just trying to find like a needle in the haystack there. Um, but like, so from your fresh point of view, do you like this? Like, because for me, I'm just like, man, it just feels a lot more natural for people to end up at 5. Like one tier below the max tier, and then it feels natural for me that like, oh, games should progress to there, and not in terms of efficiency for MMR and gold's sake to kind of end at 4, unless you get lucky, have that chance, and then shoot up to 6. And there's just this weird tier 5 wasteland there where, yeah, it might be okay, like nice to get there, but it just costs like too much gold. And for a lot of comps, it's actually detrimental to go there. Like this is why you don't go there, even when it's like 2 or 1 gold for you to go there some games.
Yeah, it's what tier 5 has is it's still a reasonable investment a lot of the time, and you don't get the extra minion, and that's a big one where you get as many minions per roll on tier 4 as you get on tier 5. Not everyone knows that, right? So they're like, oh, the extra minion will balance it out, and like, you do not get an extra minion for leveling. and you just introduce a bunch of 5-drops. And if you're playing a tier 4 comp, you don't need 5-drops in your comp. So you're quite literally you're paying gold to make your shop worse on average. So that's not great. As for whether it's healthy or not, whether it's fun or not, that's obviously, I mean, player dependent, right? How you like to play. I think part of it is perhaps how hit or miss right now the meta is, where you either, first of all, get the really strong hero or you don't, right? The heroes that, like you said, the hero power is conducive to, because, let's say what makes a good hero, right? Like Hooktusk right now would be a prime example of a hero power that is very, very conducive to getting 6-drops, right? Because you're essentially just making token pairs, economy pairs the whole time. You either get Swabbies or Sallies or Murloc Tidehunters. So you have tons of money. You can level very freely. You have a hero power that almost forces triples at some point if you have enough pairs open. And then suddenly, like on sometimes as early as 8 gold, you pull a 6-drop because you've had some Swabbies, you've had extra gold, you just leveled, and you now have an Eliza on 8 gold, or you now have a Flat Tusk on 8 gold. How is anyone going to compete with that, right? So I've been in those games plenty times where I'm the person go like, well, everyone else is dead, right? It's because there's, like if you've seen enough of that, you just stop trying to contest that, 3 turns later, where you can get your Flat Tusk at a reasonable time. So if anything, maybe it's just the disparity between the heroes right now and just the power level of certain cards that makes it that you don't really want to go to 5. Because I will say, in the games where pigs are out, it feels a bit like, oh yeah, I can do 5. Like let's say I'm playing an Omu, I'm just going to 5, and suddenly I roll 2 Light Fangs. I'm like, it's good enough. It's good enough, right? Just let it scale, let it sit there, stay on 5, look for some Selfless, look for Baron. It's cool, right? Especially if you already have a Malgadon. Like some games where pigs are out, let's say pigs are out, pirates are out, no Eliza, no Flat Tusk. I've already tripled into an Amalgadon. I'm like, why go to 6? It's fine. Just stay on 5, roll for Selfless, roll for Baron, try to get my triple Light Fang. But when pigs are in, it's always like, well, I can just hit and just stats go. Because even Flat Tusk and a Shaker can kill double Light Fang boards, right? If you have enough shields and you just go like, gem, 40 damage piggies, is just like, good luck having enough health there, right? And you do not have as many shields as a Shaker comp when you are trying to get one of each type for your Light Fang build.
Yeah, I think that the Shaker comp, and what you said like about 10-15 minutes ago, I think it's good for us to clean up our terminology, because for you it's not just all about taunt comps, right? It's like tier 4 has all of these ways, and because if it was just taunt comp, then it might not be as profitable to just stay there. But yeah,
for sure.
Shaker with Divine Shield, it goes further than people think. Like it won't get you that number 1 probably, but once again, it'll go further than you think, and you'll just scam and kill like some people on the way to your top 4. Let's talk about a few examples, and some of these are a little bit more specific, some of these are a little bit more vague, but I'm hoping that they'll sort of bring out this or your play style. And I'm kind of curious what you think about these examples. So the first one, full transparency. I already told Shady about this because I was just kind of curious. But we have a couple of examples that haven't run by him yet. So the first example was one that I actually saw on Victor's stream earlier today. He picked George because it was just the best character. I'm not gonna uh, sort of make this complicated with like the hero choices. So he picked George. There's no demons, there's no mechs, and there's no pirates. And on turn 1, he's presented with the 3/1 boar, the 2/2 acolyte, and the 2/2 elemental. And I thought it was very interesting because Victor pointed out to the chat that, yeah, you can buy this elemental, and I think a lot of people would snap pick this elemental, but he's like, you can make an argument here for the acolyte, mostly because you're George and the curve works. You can lean a little bit towards taunt comp already. Like the acolyte does a lot of good work. You can save a little bit of health because it's certainly stronger than the elemental for the first 2 turns. And he ultimately picked the elemental, but he wanted to tell chat about the potential benefits of the acolyte and how it was like if you're another player and you really want to pick the acolyte, you could. And Shady, are you picking the acolyte there, or are you still going with the elemental?
So in this specific example, mechs are banned. So there is a specific combo between Acolytes of Cthulhu and Micromummy, where on 5 gold you can shield your Acolyte of Cthulhu by a Micromummy, and you now have a 3 damage Divine Shield, which is substantially better than a 2 damage Divine Shield. 2 damage Divine Shield a lot of the time still gets value traded when people put their strongest minions in the front, because people a lot of the time, at least in higher elo, they will think about, oh, what if he has an Acolyte? Okay, I'm going to put my 3 health minions first to value trade the Acolyte, and then move on. And then whether the Acolyte has a shield or not, it doesn't really do as much work. But when you have a 3 damage Divine Shield, it's very hard to play around that early. So in this specific example, I think this elemental is perfectly fine, because you can die as George, being like, all right, I'm taunt comp. Yep, gonna get the arm. Any minute now. Any minute that arm is just, I'm not getting the arm, am I? Right? That happens, right? So as George, you could still play Shaker comp. You could still hit triples. You could still get an early Light Fang if Piggies aren't in. You can still triple into a 6-drop. It's just harder than when you're playing, say, a Hook Tusk. So yeah, I do like this elemental in that example. But if there is a Micromummy right next to the Harbinger in the shop, for me, it's not even a question. I will 100% lock the mummy by the Acolyte over this elemental, for sure.
I think that's interesting, and I think that's a play that if I didn't watch you, I wouldn't have even seen it, right? Like it just wouldn't have really entered my mind. And so, can you explain to chat what your thought, like, what is the path there? Like, just okay, so there was an acolyte, there's a mummy, and then what are you hoping that branches out into?
All right. So on the next chop, you're pretty much just hoping for either more acolytes, you're hoping for spawn, potentially more mummy, but not necessarily, or just generic strong things, right? You can get, let's say, the Prophet of the Boar and the Tough Tusk, and then you just have a gem for the Tough Tusk. But it's pretty much just once you. So if you're playing George, there is a decision you make on 8 gold, right? If you've started with the Elemental, you have the economy to level, because George on 8 gold can sell a unit, Divine Shield a unit, and tier up to tier 4. If you started with the Acolyte, you will most likely not have the economy to level on 8 gold, which is fine for George, because George does like to see some shops on tier 3. Because if you hit it, this happens actually sometimes where you're playing George and it's the 8 gold turn and you just open an arm in the shop. It's like, oof, I don't have to think this game. That's great. I just need to to find shield taunts, acquire more arm, right? And I'm good. So a couple of rolls on tier 3 can definitely set you towards that. You can also get a sensei for your Micromummy and then find a module once you do tier up to 4, which is the turn after that. But yeah, I mean, ideally what you find is Enforcer, because you can just farm so many stats of that. The Dragon Enforcer, the 3/6 that gains +2/+2 every time a shield is lost. Module, arm. If you do have that Acolyte, you can play Harbinger. Harbinger now does something. Even if your Acolyte is Divine Shield, you just put it up a bit higher and then it will die pretty fast. So yeah, those would be the main hits, right? You're looking for Champion as well. Just Champion is already worth, like, this is maybe maybe a bit of a tangent, right? But the Champion of Yashraj is such an amazing minion to find early, and I see so many people like skipping over it. Be like, I don't really want to play it, but they will happily pick a gold grubber with 1 golden minion, and I'm like, this is better. It scales faster. It's better. But like, people go, oh, gold grubber, it's amazing, right? It's just like, but you get a Champion of Yasharaj with a Divine Shield Acolyte that is guaranteed +2/+2, right?
You just
That's
called out so many people, by the way.
well, actually, +3/+3, because it's a shield. The first one, it's already better than a grubber, right?
You just called out so many people, and a few streamers that I've seen do that as well. But you're absolutely right. And I think it's just the dirty idea of committing to taunt
comp player.
I'm not a taunt comp player. I'm better than that, as they go -60. Uh, um, so next example I wanted to ask about, and this one's going to be more vague. This isn't like a turn one thing. I'm going to, and once again, there's going to be blanks here, and you can fill that in as well. So you can tell me it's like, well, okay, you didn't fill in all the blanks, but Merps, assuming this, I would do that. Assuming that, I would do this. So you are on tier 3. You've just rolled a little bit. You have a quote standard hero. So nothing weird, like let's say Cthulhu or Millhouse, right? Like and no, not a hero that like is really shifting like fundamentally the way that you play the game. You're on tier 3. Let's say it's like 8 gold, right? You know, that kind of awkward turn where, you know, you roll. You had 4 gold, you finished off your last roll, and then you are presented with an arm and a bronze warden. So you only have enough gold to buy one of them. Currently, you don't have any taunts. You just have like some minions. Let's say a Murloc, you know, you have like a pig, whatever. And the other units are just pure crap. Which one are you buying? And after you buy that one, are you freezing for the other one? So I've left a lot of things also blank, right? Like I don't know specifically what your hero is. I'm just gonna tell you it's not like a weird one, right? It's not like a yeah, like Millhouse or Cthulhu or something like that. But I want to hear your thoughts here. It's like, which one are you buying for that turn? Like, and it really just speaks to, it's like, okay, are you committing to taunt comp? Like, what's your thought process here?
So if I have 0 taunts on the board, it's snap the warden and it's let the arm go. Just because I do really enjoy playing taunt comp, but I also have to be objective in that if you never see that Argus, if you never see that module, the arm just sits there being pretty. And it also depends which tribes are in and out, of course, because we might be playing Harbinger comp where that warden will serve as a soaker, right? And we might never see that Argus. But of course, if I see the Argus while rolling, I will think about, I can just put the Argus on the warden now. And if I then see an arm, we're in business. So it'll depend a little bit. Do I have a second good Argus target on the board? Say, I bought that warden on 8 gold. I then tiered up on 9 gold. I rolled. I sold something off my board. I bought a Bolvar. Then next turn, we start properly rolling on tier 4 and I hit an Argus, I will just snap taunt both of them pretty much, because if you hit an arm after that, you have your comp, right? Like you can start playing the game. So depends a bit which tribes are in, because if piggies are in, then you might be playing Shaker comp, and that Divine Shield just serves perfectly fine in that regard. As I mentioned, you can be playing Harbinger comp. You can still just be playing mechs where you just have a deflecto and then you get a module on a reset, and then that warden is just on the board for a while and it gets sold off later. Or, let's say you have a pair on the board and you end up tripling that warden could be a dragon for a menagerie setup.
Like that. I think that's a good I think that's going to be one of the situations that people out there find themselves in as well. And I don't want them to just listen as like, oh man, I just need to play taunt comp more, like this ambiguous more that people don't really get. And that example, right? It's like, especially during this sort of like 8 goal turn where people are a little bit anxious to try to figure things out, right? That's where you get a little bit itchy. It's like 7 gold, you're just like, Bob's just been given. Yeah, 0, carefree. And then 8 gold, and you're just like, ooh, oh god. It's like I gotta make a decision soon.
That's like the worst turn, the 8 gold turn. When the game stops being handed to you and you have to take some responsibility, I don't like it.
Right, because before then it was like, well, I can't roll. Like for some heroes, right? It's like, well, I didn't really have a choice. I couldn't really roll, and I just take whatever is the best minion given to me. As like, oh, okay, I got a tough tusk, great. I get a kaboom bot, that's great. But this is just what Bob's been offering me, and I've been playing quote correct because I can't roll anyways. How awesome is this game? And then 8 gold comes along, people have to start rolling, or they have to make some tough decisions, and it's like. Oh man, I'm not exactly sure. So let's talk about a little bit in the the late mid game / end game. We're tripling into 6s now. And I want you to, in the best way possible, kind of explain to chat your thought process of tripling into a 6 when there is both pirates and pigs, and then when there is only pigs, and then when there is only pirates. And then if there are neither of those, are you even tripling into 6s? And once again, with this one, I left a lot of things like blank, right? But of course, it's like easy to do it turn 1 and have everything figured out. And then in the early game, it's like, okay, I left some things blank, but you can fit. And then now it's like, okay, I left a lot of things blank, but it's impossible to fill all those in. But let's talk about it. Let's kind of, and I think you know what I'm getting at when I point out these two tribes specifically.
No, for sure. I think I know what you mean for sure. So tripling into a 6, it's gonna depend on a lot of things, right? So the first thing it's going to depend on is your position in the game. Can your life total, can your board handle getting a 6? Because a lot of the time people triple into a flat tusk, like, I got it, I'm dead. Right? It's just like, because flat tusk doesn't really do anything the turn she comes down, right? You have to be at least a little powerful that you can survive the hit from the next person, or win the round, and then you can start doing things. So that's the first criteria. You have to check, okay, how strong am I, who am I facing, can I take a 6, right? Then we start thinking, is it worth to take a 6? So there are a couple of things you look at for the minion types. We talked about pirates and quibblers, and that's because two of the best 6-drops are in those tribes right now. We have Eliza, which is just phenomenal. You get instant power. You're pretty much almost guaranteed to win the round after you triple into Eliza. And you have a perfectly viable option where you suddenly start buying Hoggers, and the Hoggers do well because you have an Eliza. You can do APM pirates, or you pick up a Scallywag, you pick up a Baron. Hey, now I'm Scam Pirate. So Eliza is phenomenal in that regard because she's extremely safe to pick up, and she has 2 viable build paths. And sometimes you're just like, oh, I went to 6. I have my Eliza. I found 2 Kellys. Goodbye, Eliza. Right? And it's just, she's great in that regard. She will protect you in the early game, and you get some, when you get her, and you have some viable build paths after that. Then the other one is obviously Flat Tusk. We talked about that. Flat Tusk with a Ground Shaker is amazing. Flat Tusk with just the Great Boar and any Divine Shield is like +2/+2/+2/+2/+2. Like, you don't even need the Agam. And then obviously the Agam is, if you get Agam Flat Tusk, it's game over, right? Just smoke the lobby. You get a crazy amount of stats in a very short amount of time. So what are some other things to look at? My big thing is elementals. If elementals are in, tripling into 6s automatically becomes worse because you can hit any of the elementals and they're all garbage, right? So
They're so bad. They're
yeah,
so
like,
bad.
I
Yeah.
think one of the only exceptions is you're playing an Omu, you're strong. Let's say you have a Harbinger on the board and an Acolyte, and then you triple into a Genie, and then the very next turn you push 6, and you're just like, okay, the Genie is okay because now the Genie can start producing rags, and I can actually move into the elementals, or the Genie can start producing amalgadons or whatnot. So yeah, I would say if you are under pressure and you are missing sufficiently good 6-drop, meaning Eliza is out and Flat Tusk is out, you can 100% take a 5 because it's not worth the risk. You're not going to win the game off your 6 because you're already under pressure. Pulling the Cali is not going to do it. You're not going to pull up in time. If all the good 6s are in and you think you can manage, then yeah, go for it. So what are other good 6s? In Mama, great. Like, like Eliza, she comes in and protects you when she comes down, but it's not as good as Eliza because she has no real build paths after that other than, oh, I'll just buy some Harbingers, right? But usually you get those and then you triple into the Mama, not the other way around. Four Reaper, super decent, right? Beasts, I don't love because even though Gas Coiler is Imp Mama-esque, you can also get Goldrin or Max now, which both don't do too much. Amalgadon's always in, but is not my favorite early. It's really something you want to pull later. And then I think we're about there, right? Where you have your Imp Mama,
Yeah.
you have your Four Reaper, right? So you wanna if you have your deck tracker while you're playing, you essentially want to open up your deck tracker and say, okay, how many of these do I actually want? and then how many of these do I not want? And that oftentimes answers your question immediately. We're like, oh man, it's like 4-6 drops out of 12 that I actually want, and it's kind of risky to take one because you can lose on the spot if your selection is Kanger, Dina, Zap, right? And that happens, right? Like those are actual games, and you do not want to be taking that chance if there's not actually some reward at the end of that.
Yeah, games are so dynamic now. Like when we had one tribe that was out of the game, it's like games are pretty samey. And now that we have three tribes unavailable, games can look very, very different. Whether it is the pace or the potential of any given tribe. And right now, I would say, piggies are the big sort of differentiator, right? It's like when pigs are in, that is just a huge amount of scale. Also, they have good beatdown methods in the mid game as well. So it's not just like this late game. It's not just like dragons, right? Which like really bloom if allowed to, given the space in the late game. Also, it's just funny how bad Cali is now compared with in previous metas. And how right now if you get Cali, you're like, oh, but you're just not enough. Like
It's like it's
single
a
Cali,
412. All right, it's just like I guess I'll take the 412.
yeah, it's like I'll get the 412. You can get some like ancillary stats here and there, but single Cali just doesn't do it. It's like you gotta triple into double Cali, or like or double triple into double Cali, double triple into Cali, have dragons, and also get the Nadine at the same time. You're like, okay, well maybe that's enough. But yeah, games do look very different now, and going for the six, yeah, like I find that when I play, I'm just like, oh, going for a six is easy when those two things are in, because if I hit the flat tusk, that's something I'm familiar with, like that's good scaling. If I hit the Eliza, I enjoy hitting Eliza even more than flat tusk, just because I'm like, okay, well, like you said, I'm almost guaranteed to win like the next battle, and then the next 2 to 3 battles, as long as I'm not just stupidly rolling for the pieces for scam comp. I'm picking up pirates, and if the scam comp stuff happens to come along, I also pick that up. But I'm winning the next like 2 battles, and I also have a pathway into scam comp, which is very, very powerful when you get to top 3, top 2 positions. So I like doing that. But yeah, like I've also found myself just going to tier 6, and this is probably because I'm not really internalizing the percentages and the risk correctly. I get the stupid Nadina, Kangor, right? Like Gar. uh, Gar is just the worst. Gar is like absolutely the worst. And then I'm just like, okay, well that was probably a mistake. I like maybe I just got really unlucky, but if those were all in, I'm like, I probably just made a mistake here. And I think a lot of people make that mistake and then end up blaming the game whereas at least I'm sitting here being like, that was probably just a bad move. And I think a lot of people make that move, and some of our listeners out there will make that move and not realize it because they were like, it's a tier 6 meta. I went for a tier 6. What the hell just happened here? Why am I losing when I am playing the meta? And it's like, you're just not playing as smart enough.
Yeah, right. You mentioned that we're right now in a situation where the game is really, really dependent on what's in or out. You're just playing a completely different game. Like we talked about it earlier, but mechs in or out, it's just for me absolutely a different game. Like if mechs are out, suddenly I start pair gaming a lot harder because tier 4 is much more difficult to pull off. So I'm just like, well, here we go. Let's triple, right? And if I don't, then I just pray that I can get some kind of, either shaker comp or janky harbinger comp online because it's really difficult to do proper arm comp if mechs are out.
Okay. So, what I wanted to do was talk about the different tribes, and then for you to put on your designer slash dev hat, and then I'm gonna ask some specific questions and get your thoughts and fixes. But before that, was there anything that we didn't talk regarding taunt comp that you want to educate the masses about? As someone who has, I'm thinking of like Bane, you know, when he's fighting Batman, and he's like, I was born in the taunt comp.
adopted the taunt comp.
I wanted that voice. That's exactly it. Thank you, Shady. So, as someone who was born in it, molded by it, is there anything else that us taunt comp plebs should know about?
God, I mean, I can talk about it for a very long time, but let me see if I can get some nuggets like without taking up 2 hours. I think just knowing what you're rolling for is a big one with taunt comp, right? Because we talked about how you don't want to tier up to 5, but what are you actually rolling for then? And a lot of the time in the late game, it's going to be either I'm going to get my golden arm or I'm going to get my golden heart. I'm going to get my golden champion. But when you have those, you're or you're specifically just rolling for those, you could start thinking about, okay, how can I maximize my placement here? Because I can really see taunt comp on average doing poorly when people are just playing it until they die, but it's like very lazily played, right? When you die, you should probably not have 2 regular arms on your board, right? You should sneak in a selfless. You should make a poison murloc to add there. So you really want to squeeze everything out of it. You want to maximize the scam. So when you start to approach that late game where you're like, oh man, it's getting kind of shaky. I don't really know, if we can take this guy, then that's the perfect time where you're just like sell arm, play a Murloc, play Toxfin, sell the Toxfin, put a selfless down. Or when you triple, you usually don't really triple into a 6, maybe when beasts are in for a Maxna, but most of the time you're just going to be tripling for a 5 because you're trying to get Baron. And then you can get golden selfless. Oftentimes that's the one that pulls the Baron. And then your board's going to look something like a very high damage taunt first, then a golden selfless, Baron either next to pop shields or for cleave protection somewhere else or whatnot. And then the rest is either poison minions or very high attack damage taunts. And then a champion of Yasharash most of the time. And that's how you scam, these like very high stat builds when they have, say, 60 health minions, but you're dealing, 30 or more damage with your divine shields, and then you're then re-shielding them with the selfless. And suddenly it's not enough, right? They're so much bigger than you, but it doesn't matter because you get so many hits out of your minions. Especially with my favorite is like deflector reset scam. So if you have the chance to do that, you get deflectos, you taunt them, you put menace on the deflectos, and then you just watch the fireworks. You just sit back like, all right, let's see what happens, because your front line is going to be resets, right? Sometimes you just add a regular micro mummy. This happens a lot where my end game board will look something like this. My 2 minions in the back are going to be deflectos. Then it's going to be 1 to 2 maybe generic like resets where you have an egg and a micro mummy that are both huge because you've put module on them. So that's your 4 big taunt minions. And then the 3 things in the front is going to be like reset, poison minion, selfless. And then you're just hoping that they hit your deflecto, one of the 2, and then the reset goes off and you get the shield back. And then they hit into another deflecto, another reset goes off and you get the shield back. And then they kill one deflecto, but it's okay because it's got menace and it's saving the other deflecto. And it's crazy how many stats or how much stats you can overcome just by continuously redivine, but pretty much holy mackerel type gameplay where you will just get divine shields back over and over.
Don't mention that. That's disgusting.
Yeah,
that was definitely one of the worst things that Blizzard did, implementing holy mackerel and the frustrating levels. But that's good. I like that. Once
pretty
again,
much you just make holy mackerels, yeah.
Pretty much it. Just try to emulate the holy mackerel type of game styles. But I am hoping that other people out there who are listening and just have this really warped view of taunt comp have learned from this. Because I think taunt comp, whether through memes, whether through people's bad experiences by misplaying it, has gotten a really bad rap. And whether or not you, quote, enjoy playing the playstyle, it's undeniable that it is a huge part of the game. It's a big tool, and if you're not using it at all, or if you're using it incorrectly, you're just throwing away MMR. So don't do that. All right. Now, let's get into this, because I think there are some things that people have problems with, and some tribes that people think are underpowered. I want to get your thoughts on these. First, let's just talk about you laughing about the tier 6 elementals, right? Elementals right now obviously have a tier 6 problem. This isn't even a debate. Like, we don't have to debate this. Tier 6 elementals are an absolute joke. How would you fix that?
I'm probably not the best person for this because I can tell you if it's broke or not when I play with it, but I might give some suggestions that would break the game altogether. But I guess we can just identify what the problem is, right? Like, why do we not like these? The the problem with Little Rag I have is like, even if you have ideal circumstances early game, right? You have a lot of elementals at your disposal. You have the Little Rag. You don't have a board that you want to keep at the moment you triple into a 6, right? What is your board when you pull the 6? Some random tokens, a spawn, just some other stuff. It's just like, you don't want to start putting stats on your spawn or this like golden murloc that you have tripling into the rag. So you cannot aim the buffs. So that is potentially something, but once again, that might break the card immediately if you can like more, you can do more targeted buffing, right? Because Caligos, like maybe something Caligos-esque where it's like, oh, you buff your elementals or you buff, like specific minions. I don't know how. But Cali, at least you ensure that all the buffs are going on minions that you're keeping because they're dragons, right? Of course, the problem with Cali is you don't first need to buy dragons, so you can only truly play it when you already have dragons on your board. But with Rag, if you pull it early, you still just, you're buffing things that you're selling later on. So it's just, you can't use the Rag. Like playing with Rag, it's mainly just like, wait, just make it a perfect board, buy the Foe Reaper, get more Rags, get the Genie. Okay, now I can start playing cards. And that almost only happens when you are just dominating early. You're dominating, you're so strong, you go to tier 4, and then you can just like make your board like, all right, I now have all the minions that I want to keep. Now I can just get ridiculous rag stats. And then elementals feel oppressive actually when you're in that spot. But it's such a very small percentage of the games. So that would be my main identification that the problem is that you can't use it even if you have elementals early, because you're just buffing stuff you're not keeping.
Yeah, the randomness of the buffs, and also the randomness of what exactly you roll into. It's a little bit too much, especially for a tier 6, right? Like, let's compare it to the consistency and the power and the control of something like Flat Tusk. It's kind of stupid, right? Like, if you look at those two things and how with one you are able to consistently get stats, put it on exactly what you want, which means the stats matter much, much more. And how many times have we played Little Rag and you play an elemental and it just buffs that stupid elemental? So you sell it and you've literally got nothing, right? You've got nothing from your investment. So yeah, like right now, Nomi it's like it still works, especially for someone like Reno, right? In which you can golden it immediately, and that's pretty easy, like top 2/top 1. But tier 6 elementals are a real issue there. Would you also be okay if they just moved either one or maybe two of the tier 6 elementals down to a tier 5?
Once again, I don't know if that breaks the game where if you can start playing Little Rag on tier 5, right?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. That's the
Yeah,
most interesting.
Hmm.
can you imagine Omo just like, oh, 2 rags, bam, let's
Well,
go, baby.
it was tier 5
Yeah.
previously, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
they
I
got
mean,
scared.
I never played that. I never played
Yeah.
that. I have just heard stories about the Genie meta where people were just rushing Genie all day long, right? All day, every day. So yeah, I I don't. I mean, it's something that's maybe worth trying out, but it does feel like it is a bit abusable then. Where, okay, so I'll put it this way: if you are fighting right now an Omu that has high rolled and that has those elementals early, that already feels like kind of nutty when you face them like, oh, you have this on your board, right? And that can now happen a turn earlier if they're on tier 5, or you're just like tripling into them from tier 4. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Like, now that we have the power of the pigs, that might not break the game. Yeah.
I think so. And I also think it's interesting you mentioned Omu, because Omu also is it is kind of like the reach hero right now, right? He's like the outlier in which, yeah, he's level 1. He's on tier 6 when you're still trying to figure out. It's like, oh, I just got to tier 4. What interesting units am I gonna buy here? Perhaps a bonker, and they're just like, Malgadon, pass. Like, that's not good enough for me. Like, get out of here, Malgadon. I want some actual stuff. And you're just like, oh, hope I get a bunker. um, but okay, so elementals, they have an issue there. Let's talk about beasts for a second. And if you guys have seen Shady streams as much as I have, you've heard this, for lack of better terms, frustration. Okay, he's been frustrated at this a little bit. But Shady, explain to us sort of why you're frustrated by beast comps in the late game, and if you have any ideas on how to fix it.
Yeah, so it's not always the case, but oftentimes when you're playing beasts, whoever wins is whoever goes first, because you get so many stats out of your macaw that if you go first, like a lot of the time, if you would have the percentages, it would be like 50-50. It's like, well, if he goes first, then he gets these huge beasts. Then there's a snowball reaction, right? Where the clear cut example is your opponent has a zap and you have macaw. It's pretty much just, okay, if I go first, my macaw goes off, I get the benefit from the Baron, and he doesn't kill my Baron and my 2/4 Hydra. If he goes first with the zap, he kills my Baron, my 2/4 Hydra, my macaw goes off, buffs 1 fewer beast, and has much less effect because the Baron isn't alive. You can also have something where your opponent has a golden Wind Fury elemental. That thing goes off 4 times. You have the golden piggy. That thing goes off 4 times. Decimates your board before you get to do anything. So it's very frustrating when you're just sitting there like, well, if I go first, I win the match. If not, I take 20 damage. So Collins has given a suggestion where you might go first for having fewer minions. And then you can think about it where, okay, right now you run, say, an Acolyte of Cthulhu as your 7th minion when you're playing beasts because it's a reborn taunt. So you're at least protected versus regular Wind Fury. That's another thing to maybe just like explain, where I see this a lot where people are playing beasts and they would rather have this like 2/2 taunted alley cat or something stupid, like, hey, at least it's a beast. Now it's gonna grow with the macaw. But it's like in every fight your opponent goes first, that cat is dead anyway. And if they have Wind Fury, they might snipe your Baron, they might snipe your Parrot, they might snipe your Goldrun. So it's so often where people ask me, like, when are we transitioning onto Acolyte? And it's like, we're not. It's like we get an Amalgadon with a module on it and it doesn't roll plants. Yeah, for sure, let's do it. But until then, I need something that can soak a hit and then another one. So block Wind Fury, essentially. So yeah, that's the main frustration with beasts, where if I go first, I win. If I go second, I lose. And yeah, that feels like there has to be a better way where it's so like coin flippy.
And that's not new. That's been there since Macaw was introduced, especially back when Macaw was even more powerful. So the problem isn't like inherent in anything else that's going on with beasts. The problem is really Macaw, which was a poorly designed card when it came out, did not get any better design, just got nerfed to a point where the win rates matched up to what everything else was doing.
Of course, the first time the ADWCTA speaks in like an hour, it's to be grumpy about game design. No,
it's,
but I
it's
mean,
to
I
be
agree.
grumpy about a game design problem that's been in the
agree.
game for almost an entire year now. Isn't around this time last year that they introduced Macaw?
I forget. Yeah, if you're testing me on the timeline of BGs,
it was something like that. This is around the time, we may be like a month off or something, but this is around when Macaw was introduced and kind of did beast. Then they rearranged the entire beast comp, and it was never the same after that. And it was always for the worst, just because of Macaw. Like the rest of the beast comp changes, you can Like that the mama bear is now farther up and the Goldrin is farther down. It provides for a more interesting progression. Fine, whatever, but the macaw is just, you can't balance it. You really can't unless you make it huge and make it like tier 6, and then you have to move other things around and it'll change like everything.
It's hard. It definitely sort of, whenever you create a death rattle now, right? You always want to be thinking of macaw and the potential of that. But yes, when it first came out, especially when it first came out, because Shady, I don't think you were playing at that time, but at that time, Goldrun was tier 5 and macaw was tier 2. So if you can imagine that world, it was not a pretty world. It was a world in which Illidan was playable.
Yeah,
It
that must have been crazy. Then, yeah.
was actually playable because it was so easy to get that comp, and you going first twice was pretty good. That was pretty good. Guaranteeing that you went first twice and potentially 3 times, right? Because Illidan can go first after the unfair first 2. So everyone was playing that comp, and then of course you, like both of you guys started with base stats, and then before the opponent can move, you already had like 60-60 worth of stats, so they were pretty much dead. But with the beast comp, let's see. If we are actually going to do the lesser minion goes first, I think that's really interesting. I like that. And we discussed this a little bit before the podcast as well, and I was thinking it also has a little bit of implications for scam comp, because now you don't exactly need like the ghoul / Argus in order to do it. But for the late game, I was like, okay, this doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't really matter. It only matters for scam comps in that like setup transitionary phase where you're just like, oh man, I want to play this, but I could just die if they go first. So I kind of like that idea. Like, you said Collins wanted to do this. Is this something you would be in favor of too?
Yeah, once again, I'm not a designer, so it might be like, yeah, let's do this, and then like a death
Shady,
point. Yeah.
you're here to make headlines, okay? You're not here to be humble. You're not here. Give us the stuff to lure in the listeners, okay? Time to give us your spiciest takes. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very interesting to see, like, does that break the game? Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything we haven't thought about where, oh, you can't do that because then X, Y, Z happens and the game just breaks. From what we can tell right now, probably not. Where it becomes more a mind game thing where I'm gonna go down to 6 units. Is my opponent then going to respond to that by saying like, "Well, if you're going down to 6, yeah, I don't need to play the selfless. Screw that, right?"
Just the race to the
So
bottom.
because oftentimes,
Yeah, that's not
yeah,
a
right. It's
good
just like
thing.
It's not actually a race to the bottom, okay? I can guarantee. Well, okay, for the current meta, and Shady can back me up here. We're not gonna race to be 1 unit Andes here. Just to yeah.
nah. I mean that would never happen. It almost feels like Magic, where you're just mulliganing down, where it's just like, all right, down to 2, let's go. I just don't have cards right now. But when you're when you're in that position, I would say the very least amount of the smallest your board's going to be is like realistically 5, where you just had like 2 light fangs or something, and you're just replacing those, or you're just saying, all right, screw it, I just I want to go first. And that's very specifically if your opponent, it has this very great vulnerability to going second, like for instance beasts, and you have a zap, or they're playing scam company, you have a zap. In the vast majority of games, you would still just have a full board, and you would have taunt to protect any of your important pieces getting sniped. Like, let's say you were playing Golden Selfless and Baron, you would just taunt up a Divine Shield and then go second and have the Selfless shield your whole board. So realistically speaking, we would not be seeing these events where people like sell their board to go first.
Yeah, like, it sounds like a good idea in that it's not hurtful, but I don't think it solves the problem that the bird is still the bird. And in the end, you're going to have 7. If you go down to 6, your opponent can also go down to 6, and then you're back in the same problem, right? Like, you need something to break the tie, even if this is mitigating the damage a little bit. And the thing that breaks the tie is going to be part of the game. So that will be huge, right? Like, a huge fundamental change in Battlegrounds. Not just in the mind games, but just in the end game period. And that's that's something that requires a lot of thought, and until then, they need to stop designing these cards. And to be fair, they haven't really done that for a while, but they really need to stop designing these cards that are so dependent on going first.
I'm gonna run this idea because it was one that I thought of, and I haven't seen a lot of people put this idea. I think I've seen it one time in Reddit comments. I want to know both of you guys, like your thoughts on this. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but all right, just bear with me here. The person who goes, okay, it's always a 50-50 unless one person hangs gold, and whoever hangs the most gold, you're paying.
Oh god.
You're paying
So
for.
I would always go
the chance
first.
to go
I love
first.
it. Great.
Yeah, you would always accidentally go first.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, perfect.
Exactly. You would always accidentally go first. But so here's the thing: you're paying for it, right? This is another reason. Like with your gold, you are paying for something. If both of you guys hang 10 at the end, then yeah, it becomes a 50-50. But it's like it also introduces a mind game. It's like, okay, I'm gonna hang one, but it like is the other person gonna hang one as well to make it a 50-50? Like that's worth it, right? Am I gonna hang 3 to try to beat 2? Well, it introduces this sort of like risk assessment, cost benefit analysis at the same time, and maybe it's too much, maybe it's crazy, maybe it's brilliant. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant because it doesn't interrupt the other parts of the game.
Yeah, right?
It doesn't make you do things that you do. I mean, it does make you do things you don't want to do. You want to have to pay a mana or something, but that's a very small part. That's like less than a tenth of your turn at the end game, and you may end up like hanging a mana or anything anyway, right? Or you may be running a comp that can generate so much mana that you'll never use all of it anyway. All of that now gets rewarded, but more importantly is that you can control it, and you are in this mind game situation. Like I think it's better than the fewer minions, because that's not something that, as a game designer, you want to incentivize, right? Like people hanging open slots onto the board. Like it's more strategic. I think good players want to do that, but this is like a really simple kind of thing that doesn't there's no possible negative interactions with anything else, because if you're facing let's say a beast comp or a scam, the new scam comp without the whirlwind effect, without the ghoul, then you just hang all your mana if that's what it takes to win. You still don't solve the tie problem, by the way, but only if facing a scam comp without the ghoul is so devastating that you will hang an entire turns of mana just to secure it will you ever actually race to the bottom in that case.
Shady, what are your thoughts on my
I
crazy
think that
/ brilliant idea?
no, I think that that would be a fun one indeed. I'm not sure if it's something that Blizzard would implement, just because I feel like in a lot of the changes, it's just let's keep it as simple as like this is something that I feel like almost every like high level player, when anyone that plays enough, like absolutely hates. It's the fact that tokens deal damage, right? Or more than one damage. Like you open, I feel like you should never take more damage from a minion than the stars it started with, right? Like, you kill a Sneeds and you take 1 extra damage. Like this makes no sense to me, right? And I feel like part of the reason why Blizzard like is not going to change that, like sure, game time is one thing, but it's also like kind of like confusing, and it's an extra mechanic. And hey, that thing has 5 stars, let it deal 5 damage, right? So it's the same thing here, where it's just like, oh, it's just it's just random, or whoever has more minions. But I think the idea is cool for sure, and I would like to see it at least test it.
Yeah, like I think you could leave it at random. I don't think this is a huge problem. You just have to get rid of cards that rely on going first, like that specifically magnify. It's not even accidental. It's very specifically designed to magnify a random effect.
Yeah. But this was an idea that I thought of that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm either a genius or I'm full Papega here. And
No,
I don't think
there's no negative effects in game design for this idea, except what Shady was talking about, which is just the extra bulk in terms of fully understanding the game. But this is also something that you don't have to know until you're like moderately okay at this game. Like going first or not is not going to have a huge impact on you relative to other things you could be improving on until like a decent MMR, right? And they like sneak it in the tips or something. Like Bob can
Right.
say something to you, like whatever they want to do to make that more apparent.
This is thankfully actually true in the early mid game. Now that they took away Blacksmith, which was one of the worst decisions they made that card. Oh, Shady, you are are you one of those people who liked Blacksmith?
No, 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 no. God, no.
Okay.
I
Oh
I don't
hated
God.
want to
Okay.
associate
Blacksmith
Shady
back
with that.
then.
With that, I don't even know what to call it. Just a dirty idea.
It's just, man, it was so stupid to see, like, well, we're either going to beat him or take 18, and it's
Yeah.
9 gold. Let's do this, right? It's just nothing died when that thing attacked. Is like a full star damage from that, full star damage from that, full star damage from that. It's like, oh, or they hit into my 5 damage taunt and I win the fight. It's like it was such an insane coin flip. Like the best example would be I have 2 taunts. One of them enables the blacksmith, one of them doesn't. It's just like one of the fights I win, and then it's not an over exaggeration. You would take like 18 damage or something absolutely stupid. Like especially if they had 2 blacksmiths. Like it's just your game is over. You're done because you lost the coin flip in the early game. It's like unbelievably bad design, like insanely bad design.
Yeah, I think like once again, I don't really play much BGs these days, and I think part of my soul died during this one specific battle when I was already frustrated, and it was my 2 blacksmiths. Like this was a 9 gold, right? The 9 gold turn, and I faced I forget who else, but it was my 2 blacksmiths versus their 2 blacksmiths, and it was a 50. It was like a deck tracker was like 51% to 49%. Whoever lost took 18 damage and I lost. I was like, wow, that was real skillful from the opponent there. Like that was it. And for one of us, the game ended right there because there was literally nothing we could do past that point. And for the other person, cool, is they kept being able to play the game, but not from blacksmiths. Like they had to get rid of those. It wasn't like, the Eliza, which they could keep scaling from. Anyways, it's gone. I think we're all happy, and I'm happy that you're happy that it's gone. Because Shady, I can bear taunt comp, but if you were a blacksmith supporter, oof, that would have been way 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 too rough there. Uh,
Yeah, you don't want to do that publicly, right? Say that you like blacksmith.
all right, we've talked about pirate scam comps for a decent amount, but I want to talk about it a little bit more in terms of the design, in terms of how it warps the meta, and a lot of people don't like it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of people, when you're playing it, and I think we can all understand there's a lot of skill in getting to there safely. There's a lot of skill in like, okay, am I buying the Khadgar before I even buy the Scallywag? Where does the faceless come in, right? If I have like how early can I buy the faceless, et cetera, et cetera. But some people just don't think it's healthy for the game. ADWCTA, the first time you saw the pirate scam comp, I think you were just like,
I mean, it is a bug.
why?
It is a bug. It's not even like this is like if I was making the game and then I saw it, I'd be like, oh my god, that's a bug, and I'm sure that's what happened. And then they're like, I guess we don't need to fix this bug because it's fun. And then that was the last like 9 months.
I don't know if it's a bug, but Shady, your thoughts on this?
So I'm very fine with it being there because it's a lot of it is a knowledge thing where you need to scout, and you scam comp is so easy to identify when you see like dealt 24 damage showing 3 pirates. All right, I know what he's doing, right? So it's so easy to block the scallywags because a lot of the time you fight someone who's not like an expert scam comp player. So let's first talk about the stuff that can go wrong, right? There's a number of ways you can ensure your combo goes off. One is by having Khadgars with more than 2 health, and then a Ghoul and a Baron. Because the reason the Khadgars need to have more than 2 health is your Ghoul will blow up your Khadgars. Right. So you can do that either through blood gems or you can triple the Khadgar. Now, a lot of people will be afraid of cleave, and if they do not go with the ghoul, they will go with an Argus, and it will only taunt one scallywag because they reason, hey, now if I get cleaved, they will only cleave the one taunted scally and the untaunted scally, and my extra minion is safe. Now, the moment their opponent Wind Furies, it means he's going to hit the first taunted Skelly, then half your combo is going to go off. And then the second half goes off. The second half of the Wind Fury goes off. I might just snipe the Eliza and boom, the combo's over. Right. So that's another big thing. A lot of people don't realize that taunting both Skellies is a lot safer than only taunting one, because you can move your Baron up to the third slot and then have your Baron get cleaved, and the death rattle will still go off Baron enhanced. Now, let's say that those things are all in check. They've crossed their T's, dotted their I's. You can add small taunts to your combo to make the Scallywags survive. And this was a big thing when Elistra was a card, where it was like, oh, you needed to. This was when you would look at your Eliza and say, like, okay, am I playing one Eliza or two Elizas? Because my Scallywags, my Sky Pirates might grow too fast. But even if they have one Eliza, if you play an Acolyte of Cthulhu and a Void Lord on the board, there's such a good chance that their combo just completely bricks, because you're especially if they go into the Acolyte first and then they are too big to die to the initial Void Lord, and then the second one finishes off the Void Lord, and then like your Voidwalker spawn and it's just over. You've stopped the combo. So I think it adds a fun little thing to the game where that is a viable thing to play, and it's very counterable with small taunts. It's very counterable with Zap. Now, with Zap, I will say, with the introduction of Blood Gems, it is possible to redirect the Zap into the Scallywags. So if pigs are in, I will say that Blood Gems have just destroyed Zap's function, because you can just very easily redirect it into whatever you want, wherever you want it to go. So I will say that if piggies are in and the scammer knows what he's doing, it's a lot harder.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about the scam comp as well. Like, with the kind of knowledge that more people are aware of scam comp nowadays, and you're more likely to see Zap and people prepping and scouting and having the Zap early. Are you preferring Ghoul over Taunt in the two variants? And kind of, what are your thoughts? Like, if you have a choice, right? A lot of times you don't have a choice, but sometimes people do have a choice. It's like, they can either go with the Ghoul, or they can go with the Taunt variant. I've always liked the Ghoul more, because you also pop Divine Shields on their end, and to me it just seems safer. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts there? And am I missing something? Because I've always preferred the Ghoul variant.
No, if you can choose, it's the Ghoul, hands down. Because on top of the things you mentioned, if they're trying to be sneaky with Acolytes, your Baron Ghoul will actually kill their first half and make it less likely that they will actually block your combo. You also just have like the 3 board spaces instantly, so you're also just less likely to brick, because the Ghoul is dead and both the Skellies die. So yeah, no, it's a no-brainer. It's just, you see the Taunt variant most often because this is what happens. You're starting to collect scam pieces, and you really want to get Baron and Khadgar both on the board, but you do not have a golden Khadgar yet.
Yeah.
You can't play Ghoul and blow up your own Khadgar. But once again, now with the introduction of Blood Gems, it's a lot easier. Like, let's say you're rolling on tier 6, sometimes just like buy a Flat Tusk, put her on the board, buy some stuff, then sell her again, just like get some gems, right? It's kind of like buying bacon, selling bacon in a way. It's a very fancy way of getting like 3 Blood Gems for the turn. And yeah, that's oftentimes enough to just put the Khadgar on 3 HP, and then you can play the Ghoul. Now, there's actually a really fun thing you can do if you see that your opponent is very specifically relying on that Ghoul, especially when they have the Golden Baron. They have a Golden Baron and say a Golden Khadgar, you can also play a Ghoul. And then they will put their Chad on 1 HP, and your Ghoul will die and kill the Khadgar. Which is really, that's like a little like bit of a mind game thing. But if you see someone relying on the Ghoul combo, you can see like, okay, if the Chads are going down to 1, I can just play my own Ghoul, and then boom, everything dies.
That's very 5-head. I like that. Of course, very specific scenario, right?
Yeah,
It's like they,
you can go 100 games without having to, even think about that specific thing.
But very good to know. I mean, I'm sure it's very applicable to our high leaderboard listeners. Every single one of them. All, like, 500 of them are in the top 100. I'm sure. So Shady, it seems like you're okay with keeping it in the game because of these reasons. Now, ADWCTA, has Shady convinced you enough with all of these skill testing things to keep it in the game?
I have never said Scam Comp was not skill testing on either the Scam Comp creator or the Scam Comp victor. I will say that this comp is called the Scam Comp, and I did not make up that name. That is a slur given to it by every single person who has ever seen it in action, and it is just the definition of not fun and not good for the game and bad for game design, regardless of how much skill it is. Right? Now, the even worse part about the Scam Comp is that it's destroying pirates. It has been destroying the potential for pirates to be a real class and a real comp in this game of very few tribes to begin with since it was introduced. And pirates kind of stalled out of development after that, which I think is Blizzard's way of just putting a backseat to it while they deal with other crap. But they need to eventually come back to pirates, and the only way to develop pirates is to get rid of Scam Comp. They cannot both exist. It doesn't work from a game design perspective. You can't balance both of them. And Scam Comp isn't even driven by pirates. Like, we keep talking about a lot of things, but the one piece of Scam Comp, the center of it all, is Khadgar. And Khadgar's been a broken card the entire game. Whether it's broken from a too valuable perspective, it's always been broken from a what is this card doing in Battlegrounds perspective, from a pure game design perspective, and they have allowed it because they think it's fun. And I just fundamentally, not just me and a lot of other people now are just kind of sick of it. I've been sick of it since day one, but people are getting more and more on board with this as they're like, all right, I mean, this is warping the game too much, and we just want to see something different at least.
Khadgar, the one problem I have with the Scam Comp is that for people picking up the game and them learning the mechanics that they think they know, and there's all of these like, and Shady, you know what I'm talking about. There's all of these like special quirks and special rules and special things you have to know about the Scam Comp, right? Like, first of all, just knowing these different variants and then understanding sort of like, okay, well, exactly how does Khadgar work? Exactly how does Khadgar Baron work? And you see them pop out, and it's unintuitive, right? If you're trying to learn the exact interactions of Scam Comp by the actual little pirates that pop out, that's not the way it's working at all, right? This is why people, when they see, it's like, oh, it's like buffing, and then suddenly they'll see this like 29 attack thing pop up when it never was there before, but in fact it was. Eh, so that's the only thing I have against it. I'm just like, man, it just feels like this secretive, weird, techie build.
Bug. Also known as, in colloquial terms, a bug that they decided to not call a bug but a feature.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it just feels like this thing that is unintuitive. But
That's
like,
so
I just don't.
sugarcoating and calling it unintuitive. It's
Oh
a
my
bug. Like, I
God.
get how it technically works after I read about it, after I saw it, and then I, finished my
Right.
stream, and I was like, why is that happening? And then I read it, and I was like, oh, okay. I can see from a programmer's perspective why this is not a bug, but just how you instructed the program to do it. But from a player's perspective, it is a bug. And what matters in a game is the player's perspective.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
you're telling me not everyone thinks like Shady.
Not
That's
everyone
quite
thinks
interesting.
like a very logical person who is able to decipher how rules in the stack work. Like, Shady's looking at it from that old school MTG kind of thing where there's a stack, this happens first, and this, and this, and this, and this, and so clearly this will be the result. And look, the result is happening. It's great. But Hearthstone, and especially Battlegrounds with how fast it is, should not work like MTG. Like, you shouldn't have to go that level of thinking about the stack.
Oh
Yeah.
my
I mean,
gosh.
I'm incredibly biased, but I can put that aside and say, like, yeah, the way how Hearthstone normally works, Scamcom shouldn't be a thing, right? But I'm biased. I love playing it. Like, I learned the game during, well, like, I properly learned to like push during the spell meta, and during the spell meta, it was incredibly easy to get Elizas because you would just get on the house, you just level house Eliza, right? Or you'd be playing Elise, and Elise would just go like level map Eliza. So I played that comp so much, so I just, like, I feel strongly about just enjoying that comp, and like I have that experience, and obviously I want to keep using that because I'm very good at transitioning into it, and I just really enjoy playing it. But yeah, like if I put that bias aside for a moment, yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel very Hearthstone-esque, because Hearthstone, it's like simplified, just stats, more stats than the other guy. It's just that way. So yeah, I can agree with, it doesn't really feel like it's an interaction that should be in the game. But, like personally, I do enjoy it.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair.
Like, and
Uh,
Shady's reasoning for it, it's exactly why Blizzard's not getting rid of it, right? They feel like they
yeah,
stumbled onto something like that is like working for the game, so they're not going to get rid of it. But it has, even if you like, even if from a designer's perspective you're like, oh, this is a great thing to stumble onto, unless you're going to keep pirates like that like forever, it's going to phase out eventually. And I think it's run its course. It's been around for so long.
yeah, I think that's fair. So look, those are the tribes that I want to talk about. And for those of you who's like, oh, you didn't talk about like this or that tribe or demons, I'm just like, no, Scott, we could spend days talking about all the tribes, but these are the ones that were the most interesting, I think. And Shady, I had a non well, kind of Hearthstone related, but non Hearthstone related question for you to kind of wrap things up. But do you think we missed anything on this little segment about how to fix the game?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the main source of frustration for a lot of players when we talk about this, is the amount of damage you can take is just ridiculous, right? Like, I get that we introduce two things with potentially balancing issues. If there would be a damage cap where people's like, there's a 0% chance I die here, so I guess I just power level, sure. And I get that games need to go fast, because that's what Hearthstone is, fun, fast, you sit down, never going to be here more than 20 minutes or whatnot. But the like, I just had like back-to-back games of Baron Coiler taking over 30, and I'm just like, this can't be a thing, right? Like, I took 3/4 of my entire life total in one turn. This is such BS. Like, how is this possible? And I get it if the guy is just like so strong and I didn't have anything on my board, but we were somewhat close. But it's just because the coiler pops in a very specific moment
Hmm?
that I die there. And it's just like that. That's just gotta be a thing that can be avoided, right? Like, can we just please turn it into a way where I cannot at least take more damage than this whole stars your board started with? Because that happens sometimes. People have like, I don't know, 25 damage worth of stars on their board, and they end up over that because of death rattles. It's just like, and I'm not sure if that alone would stop it, but just in general, like, tokens, please, just 1 damage for tokens. Like, stop dealing 5 because a Pagel popped out of a boat and I couldn't kill it, right?
All right, so Shady, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. All right, bear with me. Don't hate me for this. What if I were to say, Shady, you're a very logical person, as we've seen, but you're completely illogical here because, as you said just a few minutes ago, the game is only 20 minutes long. If you look at it in terms of, and you've played like League, right? You've played these longer games, games that, by themselves can take like what, 40, like twice the length of a long BG game. And you know just how those games can, like, for example, in League, you have someone rage, they int, right? Like the game can still go on for a long time and nothing you could do would have affected the final impact and like exactly what happens. So you could view it as, it's not about the game as a unit, it's about your kind of decisions per second or decisions per minute that can affect the outcome. And from the fact that you are right now a top player in North America and EU, that shows the system is working. So what's wrong here?
It's because it's very unenjoyable when you are at the bad end of that variance. Sure, sometimes you have this big board, you're like, get wrecked. Like, nice board, lol, and you just deal 20 to him. But it's not a good exchange. Like, being on that end, it doesn't really make up for being on the other end where you are the one taking damage. And I'm not convinced that the game is going to significantly increase in time if you do at least, I'm not saying like you need to just deal 1 damage per token, but just something to reduce the damage at least in these extreme cases, because these extreme outliers, they're enough to make you want to stop your session when you're playing and you take over 30 damage, right? Or you have like this Khadgar boat at the end, right? Or like probably the most common mid game scam is like a taunted Sneeds with like 2 Khadgars behind it, and you're just like, oh please, right? And just like a bunch of 6-drop. You're just like, okay, I guess I just die
Yeah.
because the Sneeds rolled 6-drops instead of something else. So it just feels like it's not even just like a coin flip. It becomes, it turns this inherently already pretty RNG game into just like the next level, right? Where you're just like, well, I could have been fine, but I took over 30 damage. Like,
Yeah.
that's probably the most frustrating part, where if you had the tracker would actually tell you, like, you could win this or you could die. Just like, I feel like this shouldn't be possible. Like,
Yeah, the situations that you're talking about are the most frustrating because a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm 60% to lose here, and the damage range is like 12 to 34 damage because of that. And then, of course, it's like, oh, I took 32 damage here. That's fantastic. So 40% chance I deal damage, 60% chance I take damage, and it's a 20 damage range because of these death rattle shenanigans there. And I sympathize. I agree that it's not all about, it's like, so sort of decisions and impact per second per minute. It's a game. Like, how you feel about it definitely matters. And the best solutions I've seen are ones that involve, it's like, okay, you either can't take more damage, than the initial minion that spawns from it. So for example, if Coiler is a 6, right? Coiler is a 6. It spawns like 4 things because of Baron. Those 4 things added up can't deal more than 6. Or another one that people have pitched is, you can add all those stuff up, that's fine, but damage can't be more than the maximum damage that the person started off with on their board. So they started showing, let's say, 22 damage on the board, like before everything resolved. Okay, all the death row shenanigans can go off, and you can even count up to like 34 damage, but they started with 22 and we cap it there. That's also a more, quote, fair way to prevent these things. And I think both situations for me are more than fair. I'm for like either of those.
for sure. Just something, it's just so silly when you watch it happen. And it's like, well, part of the game, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think it should be.
All right. So the final topic, kind of Hearthstone related, kind of not, but also good opportunity to talk meta about podcasts. Because Shady, you have a podcast with Educated Collins, correct? What is it? Tell us about it.
Well, thank you. It's pretty much a 100% Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast. It's Collins and I, we just enjoy talking about the game, so we figured may as well do that in front of an audience. It was some inspiration from some friends we have that also have a podcast, so yeah, that helped.
Oh, wow. I wonder what nerds you took inspiration from. But it must also feel good to talk about a mode that they constantly update and care about. That's pretty great. So, from your perspective, now that we're talking about not just Hearthstone, but
what is your podcast called?
Yeah, exactly.
Right now, it's still just the HSBG podcast, so with a very generic name, but like it's open for change. I think. Oh my cat.
Muffin is expressing her approval or disapproval. I can't
Just
tell. I don't know what
dominance over
means.
the whole category of podcasts.
Yeah.
Just dominance.
But now that you are doing a podcast on your own, what has your experience been with podcasting? What's the podcasting meta, and how is it different than what you thought it would be? Or is it exactly the same?
Believe it or not, just nervous at the start. Collins as well, we're just like, all right, well, I guess we're just, it's like first 2 episodes or so. And then after that, it's just like, all right, just sit down and start talking. And it's like, oh, wait, it's been 1.5 hours. Crazy, right? Like, how did this happen?
Like right now.
Yeah, just it's so fun to just talk about something you just do all day, right? We're just like, all right, just because there's so much knowledge that sort of accumulates over these hundreds of games that you're playing that you're like, oh well, the meta is going to be over at some point, and then they're like, I'm not going to have shared all of that anyway. So it's really fun to just be like, great, what are we going to talk about right now, and just see how much you can you prepare for the podcast, you have these talking points, but a lot of the time you just veer off, you go more left, you go more right, you just you jump on something, you start talking about one thing, you end up in a different place. So I think that's probably been the most fun thing, where some episodes you really have this oh, we just really just started talking about this thing and it got very interesting.
So do you guys have a scheduled time every week that you do this?
Yes, we record on Thursdays at 8 my time. That's CEST, so I'm not quite sure what that translates to the other time zones.
All right, while you're finding that out, this is going to be a pitch from me. If you guys listen to this podcast and you like BG content, definitely hop over and listen to Colin's and Shady's podcast if you want really super high tier BG analysis. I used to be able to provide some of that. I can't nowadays. ADWCTA was a good questioner for some of the things that we would explain. But even like me at my peak, like I can't compare with both Shady and Collins on top of their game explaining stuff. Also, a lot of guests. Like I know you guys had Slissa on. I know you guys had Hoppa Bear on. I might be missing people, but you guys have a lot of other people who are just grinding it out. So you have three like top BG minds just really figuring things out. So definitely check it out, guys, if you like BG content. You can get in from the ground level. They're like just starting. They don't have like 300 episodes that you probably shouldn't listen to, but if you want to listen to it, yeah. So make sure you catch it. So all right, did you figure out the time conversion? What time is it?
Yes. So for 8 p.m. CST, it would be 11 a.m. PST.
All right. Excellent. Make sure you check that out. Is there anything else you wanted to perhaps advertise about your podcast? Why is it so good? Why is it superior to every single podcast out there, excluding this one?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you threw that in. That would have gotten awkward. Otherwise. Yeah, we're just. I would say there's going to be a healthy balance between. Well, Collins obviously has still a very very good analytical mind about the game, but he likes to downplay it a little bit and just like Collins says, more like the lighthearted approach, where sometimes I can just start talking about a hero and just be like, all right, so on the 5 gold turn we're gonna be doing this, on the 6 gold turn we're gonna be doing this, right? So like the really nitty gritty like analytical approach. So there's a nice little balance in between that, and yeah, if you like the game, if you like either of our streams, it's quite likely you're gonna like podcast as well.
All right, awesome. I think that's basically it for today. And of course, if you guys like Shadybunny, you can find him at twitch.tv/Shadybunny. All right. And Shady plays a lot nowadays. I said this at the very beginning. I'll say it again, just in case you didn't listen to everything or you forgot. Shady, I think, is by far the person who explains the most and explains the best. I think there are a lot of people who play the game at a very high level, and it's hard to differentiate them. But it's very easy to differentiate Shady when it comes to explaining plays. Don't backseat, though. He doesn't like that. Don't do that. I'm warning you guys.
You guys know this if you haven't checked out his Battlegrounds content or his podcast, but you've checked out his arena stuff back in the day. Like even in the arena world, like back then, he would always explain every play, like even more than he was probably the only person that could say that about. That would explain the plays as he's doing them more so than what we would do on an average night.
Yes. So I think that's it. Shady, any last words? Any one you want to give a shout out to?
I just thank you guys like for the very generous highlighting the podcast, having me over. Just really appreciate it. It's been super fun. Thank you.
There you go. From the Poltralizer to 2021 talking about BGs. What's gonna happen in like 2025? What are we gonna talk about then? Who knows?
It's cyclical. The Poltralizer is coming back.
Oh gosh.
it'll be about Diablo 4, but the Poltralizer's coming back.
Shady's gonna have the vintage hair, the glasses. Oh
Oh, the
man,
glasses.
the glasses were the
Yeah.
best part.
If
But
you guys are,
that's
I
it.
wonder how many of our listeners like hear the Poltralizer and think, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what that was." I wonder how much, because that was before we had a podcast. That was before the Lightforge podcast. The Arena Coop was existent, but not the podcast yet. Not for another like 6-7 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I still remember that that ogre that had a 50% chance of attacking the
Oh my
wrong target.
God.
Like Merps and I had like a deck with those. That was that was a
That
lot of
was
fun
great.
playing. Very
And our
fun.
epic Gazrilla clip, that was good. That made the rounds.
Yeah.
Good old Gazrilla. Okay. I think that's it. Shady, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to your BG content, Collins, in the weeks to come. And we'll have you back on. Who knows when, but it'll happen. That's it. ADWCTA, take us away.
All right. Until next week. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merp. See you guys.